Upstairs Neighbour Media presents Deep Green Gravity by Shaun Phuah. Read for you by the author.
Ambil tu nakatsoy, my jiakong says, pointing in the direction of two blue cooler boxes that are huddled together with some snacks, fishing rods, and rolled up tents for a camping trip. I open the coolers up and see that they are both filled with plastic water bottles of Nestle Pure Life, all old enough that most of the plastic looks dented and worn out, with some of the labels peeling off and leaving behind a sticky residue that collects dust and turns fuzzy. Jiakong means grandpa in either Hokkien, Cantonese, or Hakka. I'm not sure, honestly, and just like my grandma, who I have only ever known as Papa, I don't know what his actual name is. I grab some red and orange bags of prawn-flavored crackers that are huddled around some of our other camping equipment, and one of the blue coolers, and start hauling it towards my jiakong's shitty red Peradua kanchil. The cooler is heavy, and I can hear the bottles inside bumping against each other and sloshing as I haul it up into the back of my jiakong's car. The weight of the coolers brings the ass of the tiny car a little closer to the ground, and I see that cramped into the corner of the trunk is jiakong's ancient hunting rifle, resting on and compressing a small blue box of surplus ammo. Guns are a rare sight in Malaysia, and jiakong is the only person in our family to have a license. I look at the smooth, well-oiled metal a second longer before slamming the trunk door closed. I pull my phone out of my pocket, tap the screen, and see my battery is at 97%, which should let it last 2 days at least if I don't use it too much. Just the two of us now, driving down winding Klang roads, moving further away from the city, palm plantations and ocean of homogeneous green and their husky trunks lined up in massive, uniform rows that go on forever on either side of the road as my jiakong's foot stays steady on the gas pedal, the air conditioning of the car, old and only ever blowing hot outside air in at this point. My jiakong clicks the AC off and the speedometer immediately jumps up 15 kilometers an hour, and I can feel sweat collecting and sticking to my nose. I look out at all these stumpy palm trees, some of their green leaves shriveled into ashen gray and brown dryness under the intense afternoon swelter of the Malaysian sun, high up in the sky and causing heat mirages to distort the air around us, turning cars in the distance into indistinct wavy colors and making the road ahead look wet. Further in the distance, where the jungle has yet to be cut down to be turned into palm oil, is the rainforest. Thick leaves of many types, broad or fern-like, bushy and competing for space. Trees struggling to get past the canopy, their branches wrapping around each other as they strangle one another and breathe in sunlight. Crowning above some patches of green canopy are massive sheer walls of white and grey limestone. Jiakong coughs a few times, clears his throat, winds the window down, and spits a fat ball of phlegm out onto the road. His English sucks, barely speaks any of it, which is too bad because that's really all I speak well. His main language is Hakka. Our whole family is Hakka, but really only he and two of my cousins know how to speak it. Useless language anyway, since you'll never find someone dumb enough to commit to learning it in Malaysia. He's the only old Chinese guy I know who talks to other Chinese people in Malay. His Malay's perfect, better than his Mandarin. Probably how he ended up being a cop all those years back. Probably that plus being a veteran of the Malayan emergency. A massive truck with an open bed of pigs rolls down the road beside us, large enough and with enough speed to feel its vibrations from inside our car. Each time its fat wheels go over uneven road, I can see the smooth-skinned pigs in the back hopping and bumping against each other. Its exhaust pushes out a constant stream of thick black smoke that travels up and dilutes in the humid air. Wah! My jiakong laughs, looking at the smoke pumping out of the exhaust pipes, and he points to make sure I know what he's talking about. 很漂亮 huh? Cantik niya. Only a cop would find car exhaust pretty. I look at my jiakong, a thin man with liver spots that run up and down his arms and brown pigment pools around his forehead in big sheets of discolored skin. His hair is there, but it kind of looks like it was gathered together by uncoordinated crows. He thinks I didn't understand him, so he turns his whole head to look at me, and he points again at the truck now much further ahead, its black smoke the most visible thing about it. Very pretty, he says. Choking hazard, I say. Jiakong laughs at this. You speaking? Very nice. Soon the large swaths of palm plantation on either side of us give way to random nature growing over itself. Thick vines and their groping leaves wrap around electric poles and their wires, covering rubber, plastic, and rusting metal under thick green. Jiakong makes a wide turn off from the main road and onto a dirt road, which forces him to slow down as the car dips and rises over crumbled rocks and uneven earth. Above, the trees begin to shade us from the intense afternoon sun, while allowing tiny spots of yellow sunlight to sieve through the gaps between the leaves to polka dot the dry ground. My mom used to tell me stories about my Jiakong. I'd barely seen him growing up since he'd gone off to Indonesia to work after my papa died when clotted blood caused both her kidneys to burst. My mom loves him. She says he's a good father, and then tells me about all the times he'd come home drunk, still wearing his blue policeman's beret, and how he'd line all his kids up against the wall and force them to recite the multiplication table. Mom always talked about him as a loving father, who would play songs like My Prayer by the Platters on the ancient brass gramophone he used to own, but then also how he'd get hit-swinging drunk and then go out with his massive mud dogs and harass people late at night, knowing no one dares to challenge a cop, yelling till most people in Sungai Buloh knew who my Jiakong was and what he was about. My mom grew up real poor with my Jiakong, and he'd make traffic stops to accept bribes all night, till he got a barely livable salary that fed a family of 6. Mom tells me he used to dote on her, that she was his favorite out of all the other kids, would sneak extra chicken wings to her under the table. She says I look a lot like him. Jiakong rolls up onto the most even patch of dirt road under thick shade. He twists the key in the ignition and the car stops vibrating. He turns to look at me, smiles, and pats the back of my hand twice. Here. A lot further than I thought it was, I say. He just smiles and nods at me. We get out of the car, and immediately I'm hit with the high-pitched drone of cicadas and humidity collecting against my skin, forming an extra layer of damp stickiness. Jiakong takes in a deep breath of air till his chest is puffed up, and then he lets it all out as a long sigh. Fresh, he says. I smile and nod at him. It's true. The air here is so different. 1,000 different smells coming together to form the distinct smell of thick rainforest, wet earth, and humidity mixing together with the occasional sweet or rotting scents of blooming flowers. Far in the distance, I can hear the rushing water of a waterfall, and I can see Jiakong with his head angled, listening for the sound too. Every once in a while there is the faraway, throaty hoot of some animal. Jiakong takes a few steps towards a thin tree by the edge of the dense jungle before he bends down low to inspect the base of its trunk. Lie, Jiakong says, motioning to me with his finger to come close. See? He points at an etching at the bottom of the trunk. And when I crouch down next to Jiakong and look closer, I see that someone has etched Chinese characters deep into the wood that read, 一只有一只观鸟. I have no idea what the words mean, and I know Jiakong is illiterate. Jiakong digs deep into his pocket and pulls out a small silver compass. He flips the cap open, holds it out flat on his palm, and waits for the red needle to settle before looking up towards the dense rainforest. He walks up towards what seems like impassable, thick greenery. Plants with fan-like leaves that are razor-sharp poke out around each other. But Jiakong lifts them aside by the base of their leaves to reveal an indistinct dirt path that leads into deep jungle. We hear, Jiakong smiles at me before standing up with a creaky, "Ayah." Jiakong walks back to the car to grab some of our gear, and I'm still here by the Chinese characters etched into the trunk of this tree, and I'm staring at the words, written with almost perfect handwriting with something that has bitten deep into the wood. And then I see some movement within one of the characters, and so I move a little closer to look better. There is something curled up within the empty space of one of the characters. A dull orange and black bug is sandwiched deep inside, and I can see its body moving slightly from side to side. I look even closer, and I see that it can't be a single bug, but it is actually a massive amount of tiny insects close together. I can barely see them deep inside the etching, but suddenly they move all at once, and it gives me an itchy feeling in the back of my head and I have to stop looking. I hear Xiaokong grunt and the scraping of plastic on metal, and I look over to see him trying to pull the cooler out the back. So I get up off the ground and run over to help him out, though the sight of all those bugs moving together makes me want to scratch at my neck and the grooves of my elbows. I run up next to him, and I lift the cooler from the bottom before setting it on the ground. Xiaokong smiles and pats me on the shoulder before he reaches further into the trunk, grabbing his hunting rifle and slinging it over his shoulder and holding the box of ammo in his right hand. Already my sweat is causing my shirt to stick tight against my skin like a wetsuit, turning the yellow fabric a shade darker. I reach into the trunk, grab a backpack with both our rolled up tents and put it on. I feel a stinging, itchy sensation by my forearm, and I look down to see a black and white striped mosquito with its red, engorged abdomen still drinking when I bring my hand down and turn its body into a thick paste of black and red against my skin. The humidity causes its body to stick to me, even as I grab a dried up leaf off the ground to wipe away at it. Xiaokong bends down and lifts the cooler on one end. Lai, come, tolong. I lift the cooler up from the other end, and together we walk past the edged tree into the hidden trail Xiaokong showed me. Xiaokong steps over the fan-like plants that cover the dirt trail, but I don't see some of the leaves, and I can feel their thin greenery cut into my calves and ankles, causing tiny cuts that bleed slightly and scab over in minutes, and I accidentally bring my foot down and squish the plants flat. Nature documentaries always show the rainforest in bright neon green color correction, but here we are greeted with a dark green that covers everything in its heavy shade. The cicadas and their constant drone blend in with the sound of distant rushing water, and in the distance some animals jumps from tree to tree, causing branches to creak and the loud brushing sound of so many leaves being pushed against each other. Xiaokong and I follow the winding dirt trail, stepping over massive tree roots that extend far beyond where the trees are. Roots that shoot out from the dirt and rest on the ground before re-entering the earth a few meters away. Hard and sturdy, many roots larger than my forearm. More mosquitoes land on my body. I slap at the ones that are trying to land on my legs and arms, but a few itchy welts are already rising on the backs of my hands and on my left knee. My whole body feels heavy with the weight of humidity as we continue along the trail, and the cooler full of water bottles sloshes between us as the occasional bird calls out from the branches above. The sounds of water get closer, and its smell is in the air, fresh and cool, creates its own atmosphere in the jungle. And soon enough, we see the stream, perfectly clear, running between rocks and over smooth sediment. I can see Xiaokong smiling as he watches the water. We start walking along the damp sides of the stream, which grows stronger and wider the further upstream we travel, with miniature tide pools hidden behind larger granite rocks that cause different currents to move between each other to form spirals. Some water seeps in through the sides of my shoes, and I can feel my socks getting damp. And I look at Xiaokong with his flip-flops on, purposefully stepping into deep pools of cool water. The rocks start to turn slippery with algae, and Xiaokong says, "Care ya? Care." I nod in agreement, and we continue with slow caution. Further up, mini waterfalls have started to appear, along with deeper streams and rocks, thick with silky algal bloom. Xiaokong motions over to the sturdiest and driest patch of ground, and we set the cooler down. He pats me on the back and says, "So good." He now wades into the stream until the water is touching the cuffs of his brown cargo shorts. He bends down, cups water in his hands, and splashes it onto his face before he cups more water and takes deep gulps. He smiles at me and motions me over. Clean. So fresh. "Tak boleh beli air ni." He laughs at his joke and I smile back and nod. The walk has made me thirsty, and the water is so clean I can see all the way to the bottom sediment. I wade in beside him and splash cool, refreshing water against my face before cupping water in my palms to drink. It tastes clean, and the humidity in the air around us feels lighter. I look at my Xiaokong now as he takes in a deep breath of air and starts wading back to solid ground, and I can't help but wonder which jungle he'd been in during the war. Growing up, my mom had told me the story of when he'd fallen into a pit trap set up by the communists. at how his whole platoon had left him for dead. And then a few days later, he had somehow managed to climb back out and rejoin his team. The Brits had given him a couple of medals for his bravery and valor, but we've since managed to lose them. Probably thrown out by accident with a bunch of my papa's stuff after she died. I wonder if Jiakong had killed the communists in the war. I wonder what he would have done if it was Papa in Batangkali when British troops came in and massacred everyone with automatic gunfire. Rubber tappers just like my papa. If he could, he would probably tell me the Japanese came in and slaughtered 50,000 ethnic Chinese across Singapore and Malaysia. Plenty of Indians and Malays too. Now look at how small Batangkali is. Another burning village. Well, maybe he wouldn't say any of that. I don't know him that well. It's the stuff my papa used to say. She always talked about the Japanese and all those hidden places in the jungle where bodies pile up. I cup more clear water in my hands and take another long drink, feeling the coolness spread down my chest before wading back to solid ground with Jiakong. We continue following the stream uphill to its source, can hear the rushing of water get louder, constant white noise and a background static that blends together with the loud droning of cicadas to make one massive wall of sound. More, smaller waterfalls appear before us the higher up we climb, the water now much more aggressive and filled with foamy white force. I bend down by the stream, cup my hand in, and take a drink of water. As the water goes down my throat, I taste in the back of my mouth the subtle and foul smell of rot. This makes me spit, and Jiakong turns, sees my face, and laughs. He comes back over to me and pats me on the back as I gag and spit over and over again to get the taste out of my mouth. I try to find the words to communicate with him. 好像, macam ada rosak sudah. Jiakong laughs. Rosak? Air terjun boleh rosak? Ya, macam rotten. Busuk sudah. Jiakong just shakes his head, cups a big handful of water, and drinks deep. He smiles at me and says, Sadab. I spit one last time to try to get the aftertaste of rotting meat out of my mouth before we pick the cooler up and continue our trek to the best waterfall near the top. Wild orchids begin to appear on either side of the stream as we continue. Fat, color-saturated petals extend from long vines as if trying to breathe the gentle spray coming off the waterfall, and soon there are hundreds of them on either side in colors of purple, red, orange, light blue, and pink, mixed with the deeper greens of their vines and leaves, and their sweet syrupy fragrance becomes thicker, almost overpowering in the air as we continue on. And then I notice it. Rot. Beneath the flowery smells, but still there, mixing together with the humid heat and fragrant pollen to turn into something pungent and nauseating, impossible to ignore and lingering in the back of my throat, sweet and sour. A big, black and iridescent carpenter bee moves from orchid to orchid, covering itself in yellow dust, totally uncoordinated in its messy flying. The earth beneath us starts to plateau, and the rock formations that form miniature waterfalls begin to even out into a single calm stream as we continue. The smell of rot is heavy in the air now, inhabiting the back of my throat, beginning to overpower the sweet smell of orchids that hang around us from their long vines. And then I look up and see something half submerged in the stream up ahead, the large body of a mammal, gray and black. Jiakong looks up and sees this too, and I watch his body tense up as he pays close attention to this thing laying in the water up ahead. The stream flows gently around its body, causing its hairs to float under the current like clumps of seagrass. The animal's neck is bent so that its body hides its head. Jiakong bends down low, picks a rock up and tosses it so it lands with a heavy plop next to the large animal. It doesn't react, and Jiakong relaxes a little and starts walking up to the animal's body. I follow close behind him, and I can see now that there are flies buzzing all around the animal, and the smell of rot intensifies the closer we get to it, the still air allowing the thick, sticky smells to linger in the afternoon heat. We get close to this animal now, and I see that it's a dead water buffalo, a big guy with large horns. Its large, dark brown eyes stare blankly, with the lower half of its face submerged in water. Flies buzz around his big curved horns and land across his bloated body to clean their mouth parts, lay eggs beneath the fur, and feast. It's easy to tell male water buffalo apart from their slightly smaller, shorter-horned female companions. Wah! Jiakong says, bending down to look at the buffalo, unfazed by the rot, and all these flies buzz up all at once at any slight disturbance in the air, and their feet land against the backs of my ears and the top of my head, and I swipe away at them, knowing they've touched all that dead skin. He smiles up at me and raises both his arms for scale. Basarnia? Big? I think about having drunk from downstream of all this rot, and it makes me nauseous enough to get me dry heaving. Not looking, I step into a deeper part of the stream and get my shoes wet. Cold water seeps in, and my socks absorb it all, and I can feel the bottoms of my feet squeaking against the soles of my shoes. Jakong pats my back and says, no sick, badan kita lagi strong. He laughs, flexing his thin arms so the sinewy muscles show past his now loose skin. 2 days die ago, Jakong nods, bending down to put a hand on the ox's head. The hair all over its body is thick with grease, and I can see clumps of ivory-colored fly eggs stuck close to its skin. Water passes through its slack open mouth and its blocky teeth create tiny, new currents that flow back into the main body of water. Its body leaks dark liquid into the water from its underside. I think about how to put the words together before I say, Macam mana dia mati? Mana saya tahu, Jiakong laughs, walking around the animal's dead body, looking for what might have killed it. I think kena sick, he says. Flies buzz up from the ox's dead body to fly around my head and land against my skin, where I can feel their fuzzy feet tickling the hairs on my arms. A meter-long piece of black driftwood floats downstream towards us, and I grab it as it floats by. I come around to the dead ox's side and poke at its skin to try to expose its belly, as maybe whatever killed this thing did it from beneath. I manage to lift the loose skin up, and we are both immediately greeted with a massive, silky, and dark green algal bloom growing from its underside. There is so much thick algae underneath this ox that it looks like a hairy green rug has grown out of its skin, almost enough to hide its legs entirely. Clumps of the stuff break off from the disturbance and begin to float downstream. A large bit of algae brushes against my ankle, and this startles me enough that I drop the driftwood, causing nasty rot water to splash back up in my face. Zekong laughs as I go back into a spitting fit, and I wade upstream of the ox's body as fast as I can to splash cleaner water against my face. Zekong wades through the water to where I am and pats my back as I keep trying to spit the sour taste of rot out of my mouth. I think break time, Zekong says, nodding his head and pointing a little further down to a small, dry clearing beside the long stream of water. I nod, and together we pick the blue-white cooler box up again and wade our way towards the clearing. We step out of the water and are greeted by tall, husky tree trunks with massive broad leaves at the top. Thick green vines wrap themselves around the trunks of trees, and various parasitic ferns and their lush greenery bloom from the sides of trunks, all of them fighting for more sunlight and swaying in the humid breeze. I pat the phone in my wet pocket, pull it out, and tap the screen on to make sure it's okay. The battery is already at 72%, and I hadn't even been using it. Okay, Zekong nods. To a good place go camping. And with that, he pulls his backpack off and starts to unfold the neatly packed navy blue tent. He moves fast and doesn't ask for my help as he pushes metal stakes into the ground and ties the tent down to them, knotting string together with practiced fingers. I'm untying my shoes and trying to peel them off my feet. They're soaked, and my feet feel vacuum sealed to my shoes. By the time I've got my socks off, Jiakong has already set up most of the tent and is about done tying the top tarp that keeps the rain off. Saya boleh tolong? I ask. Habis sudah loh, Jiakong laughs, pulling a knot taut before sitting down on a flat rock and sighing. He points over at the cooler box sitting next to me. Lai? Sorry? Him asking for water makes me realize how thirsty I am, and I pull the lid off the cooler box and see all those bottles of water sitting on top of each other. And I toss one over to Jiakong, which he catches. I grab a bottle for myself, twist the cap open, bring it up to my lips, and immediately taste bitter, burning alcohol. I swallowed a little bit that I let through my lips and wince, and Jiakong's sitting across from me, laughing so hard he's falling off his rock and looking down at his water bottle in awe. Wrong law, he laughs. The alcohol I swallowed tightens my throat and dries my mouth out even more. And I grab another old plastic bottle with most of the Nestle Pure Life sticker worn off, and I uncap it and immediately smell more vodka. Wrong law! Jiakong laughs, and he's laughing so hard he's barely making any sound. Just shaking his body and giggling till his face is red. He raises his body up to me. He raises his bottle up to me and cheers, and takes a long sip. Humid heat sticks to my skin and dries my throat out even more, making it feel like I'm not breathing in enough oxygen. I think back to the start of the day, and I remember the second blue cooler box and feel panic blooming through my chest. Wrong one! I yell, opening the top of the cooler, uncapping more bottles of water, and only smelling alcohol. The half one? No problem, no problem. Jiakong laughs and waves his hand out in a big arc, pointing to the stream and its gentle flow. But the smell of that rotting ox is still in the air, and I know it's just downstream, though from here thick tree branches cut into our line of sight to obscure its body. Mana you tengok pun ada ay? Jiakong smiles. I look to the stream, and it feels like the inside of my throat is wrinkling with dryness. I take another sip of some vodka, and all the liquid does is burn against my lips and the back of my tongue with bitter strength, and it makes me feel like I'm not getting enough air with all this humid heat sticking to my skin like plastic wrap. Jiakong brings his vodka bottle up to his lips and takes another long sip. He looks up at me and says, "You buat bagus saja." I can't think of the Malay word for thirst, so I say, "Yeah, but I'm so thirsty." Unsure if he even understands any of that. "If thirsty then," Jiakong says, standing up and walking over to the stream, cupping water in his hands and taking a long drink. He sighs when he's done, looks back at me, and goes in for more. My mom told me about how much he used to hunt. He'd go deep into the woods and shoot wild boar, bring it home to eat for at least a week, and use every single part of it, braise its meat and turn its guts into soup. She told me about how his aim was perfect, would shoot a bunch of squirrels to skin and eat at home, and they'd all be shot straight through the eyes. Apparently, he isn't just a good shot, but is also an excellent butcher. And Mom has told me stories of how he'd butcher his wild boars out in the jungle and then bring the meat into town, all tied up in bleeding plastic bags. And he'd hand the bags over to my mom, who was still a kid, and tell her to ask the nearby convenience store to put the meat in their fridge since our family didn't have one. Mom tells me about how the store owners hated this, but would never talk back to a cop. My mom told me how he'd even shoot dogs, monkeys, and bats and bring all of it home to eat. I tell her that's not good, that things like bats carry disease. "We didn't know anything back then," she'd say, and rice is only so filling. When he's done drinking from the stream, he walks over to our gear by the tent, rummages through his backpack and pulls out a big bag of puffy prawn-flavored crackers. My throat is sore with dryness, and so I walk over to the stream and see the ox's body further down where we came, its head now angled in my direction. I bend down, cup water in my hands, and take a long drink. It washes the harsh bitterness of the vodka away, but even though this ox is downstream of the water I'm drinking from, I can still taste the savory fermentation of rot in my mouth. Something is stuck to my teeth. It feels coarse and inedible like hair, and I dig my fingers around where I feel the hair and pull it out to see that it looks like the same green algae that were growing out from below the ox. I fight back the urge to dry heave and flick the algae back in the water. "You tak lapar?" Jiakong asks, lifting up his open bag of prawn crackers. A smiling cartoon prawn over the silver plastic packaging, and Jiakong's fingers look pollinated with its orange flavoring while he chews with his mouth open. I nod my head and he tosses an unopened bag of prawn crackers over to me. I rip it open and see all the puffy crackers inside like styrofoam packing peanuts. I pluck one out and eat it. Salty, crispy prawn flavor spreads across my tongue, and I can feel the rough texture of the cracker rubbing against the roof of my mouth. I'm about to eat another one when I feel all that salt drying my mouth out again. I look back at the stream and figure I'd rather not have to drink from this water so soon, and plop the cracker back in the bag and curl the top up. Jiakong crunches down on another prawn cracker before putting his own plastic bag away. He shakes his head at me. "Not good food," before he moves over to where all his gear is leaned against the tent, and he grabs his hunting rifle. make good food. On May 13, 1969, riots broke out across Malaysia, and ethnic Chinese and Indians were targets, with Chinese and Indian homes being burned down, and then of course more violence when Chinese and Indians started attacking Malays who had nothing to do with the riots. Mom told me about how he'd gotten everyone to board the house up and hunker down when Jiao Kong spent the next 4 days up on the roof of his rifle. The Malaysian government brought the army in, implemented a curfew, and began a shoot-to-kill order for anyone outside their homes. There are many stories of the army shooting people at their front doors, along with accounts of people not knowing a shoot-to-kill order was in effect. My mom likes to say a lot that animals probably look at us and laugh at all the stupid things we kill each other over, and I always want to tell her that male langur monkeys will kill baby langur monkeys that are not theirs. Jiao Kong pulls his compass out, watches as the needle settles, and starts walking deeper into the jungle. That alcohol I sipped has me feeling a little lighter, the ground less solid than it was a few minutes ago, and I don't want to be here all by myself. So I roll my wet socks back up, squeeze my feet back into my still soaked shoes, and run after Jiao Kong before all this dense greenery hides him from my line of sight. I run up close behind him, watching his rifle sway on his back, and I feel a pinching sensation on my ankle. I lift my leg up to see a massive black ant the size of a child's thumb has clamped down hard with its mandibles on my skin, making it sting. Fuck, I breathe, and reach down to pull it off. It holds on tight, and when I tug on it hard enough there is a quiet popping sound. Its whole body comes off between my fingers, but its head remains stuck and clamped down on my ankle. Wind blows through, and all the leaves brush against each other in a massive flurry of rustling sound, and I can close my eyes and see waves crashing over the shoreline. Jiao Kong doesn't notice me lagging behind and keeps walking as I brush this ant head off my ankle. And then I notice the sound of leaves being shifted beside me, and what sounds like a man clearing his throat. And I turn to my right and see not too far off from where I'm crouched is a wild boar, digging its nose into the ground and uprooting the earth around the base of a massive dead tree with a large, lush, dark green parasitic fern growing out of its brittle middle. The boar looks up at me, and we both make eye contact. The boar hums, and it is a nice, consistent note. I look up at Jiao Kong and see that he has walked even farther off, but I don't want him to see this boar, because I know he'll try and kill it. The humming gives way to a gurgling cough, and I turn back to the boar to see it's got its mouth open and it's dry heaving. Its whole body vibrates with the effort of trying to cough something up. And then I finally see some slimy, dark green and blue iridescent thing slide out of its throat, past its blocky teeth and yellow tusks, and plop out onto the disturbed earth the boar was digging through. The boar looks at me in the eyes once more before it turns around and runs off as fast as it can. You berak ke? Jiao Kong calls, realizing how far I've lagged behind. Kalau mau berak cakap sajalah. Nanti saya jalan sampai kucing macam mana? I have no idea what he just said, so I call back. Ada barang here. Huh? You dah berak? Ada barang, I yell louder, and I can hear his feet brushing against plant leaves as he walks back to me. I can't stop looking at what this boar puked up, and I grab a brown, dried up leaf off the ground and wipe away at thick saliva covering this dark, iridescent thing. I wipe away at the saliva until I realize I am cleaning it off feathers and that the boar has puked up a small bird. Jiao Kong comes up next to me and squats to have a better look at the soil when he sees the bird in my palms, and I can smell the vodka on him. He picks the body up with his bare hands, and now I can see its dark green head as Jiao Kong lifts its black beak off its iridescent chest. Oh, he says, lifting a wing up to inspect it, full of thick, sloppy saliva. He then brings his fingers up to the bird's head, and with his thumb, he lifts an eyelid to reveal a bright red eye like a cranberry with a hole in the middle. 这是, Jiao Kong says, thinking about what the bird is called, and then he says, 这是 ASEAN glossy starling. Oh, I say, looking at this dead bird, about the size of Jiakong's hands. Bird like this? Jiakong nods. Tasty. Ugh, I say, sticking my tongue out, which makes Jiakong laugh. Fuck no. At this, Jiakong shakes his head and drops the bird body back to the loamy earth the boar had dug up. He stands up, looks at me, and says, 你不知道死恶. I don't know what that means, so I just nod and follow after him as he stands up and walks deeper into the jungle. Thick heat causes time to distort, making it feel like we've been walking for hours, and we've been baking beneath humid shade as the bright white glare of afternoon sun cuts through the canopy, and the heavy heat causes sweat to pool in my clothes and stick against my skin. The air is nothing but deep green humidity, and it is heavy enough that moving takes effort, and it constantly feels like I'm trying to breathe through a thin film of water. The sound of constant cicada drones and birds chirping and squawking in massive numbers makes it so I still see large green leaves all around me, even when I close my eyes. Jiakong doesn't pause, the rifle on his back creating a distinct line of sweat the length of his gun, but he barely seems to care. My mom's always told me about the love Jiakong has. I've been told the story 100 times now, how once as a kid, my mom had been balancing on the lip of a massive, empty clay pot, and how too much weight on a single step had caused the whole thing to topple, and she had hurt her leg bad enough that she's pretty sure she broke it. Jiakong had known exactly what to do, and the next thing she knew, he had gotten her whole shin wrapped in a splint with 2 pieces of bamboo tied together with cheesecloth, and then her leg healed like nothing had ever happened. I must have been at least 16 or 17 the first time I'd met him properly, after he'd come home from Indonesia. He came home with so many gifts and soft toys and Jakarta fridge magnets for the whole family, and we'd celebrated with a big green pandan flavored cake full of cheap candles that dripped pink wax onto the smooth green surface, and we celebrated with so much tax-free alcohol from the airport. Ah! Jiakong gasps, looking up at a tree branch, and he becomes hushed as he points at what he's looking at. You see? You see? I follow what his finger's pointing at, and I see it in the branch. A large Asian glossy starling, at least twice the size of the one the boar had puked out. It opens its beak and calls out once, a high-pitched chirp. I can feel my stomach starting to hurt from hunger, and Jiakong pulls on the string of his rifle and holds the weapon in his arms. With his index and thumb, he grabs the bolt and chambers around. Metal slides against metal and components click into place, and the moment the round is chambered, I watch as the bird flies off and lands on another nearby branch. Jiakong tuts. His eyes search for where the bird landed, and I point over to where I see its black back feathers now on a higher up perch. Jiakong pats my back and starts stepping through dead leaves, trying to make as little noise as possible. I follow after him, can feel the layer of dried out leaves get thicker as I follow Jiakong to a better vantage point. Jiakong walks over to a large, smoothed over granite boulder, fuzzy with green moss and hardened orange lichen. He gets behind the boulder, rests his rifle against the rock, and moves it around for a second until it feels stable. I crouch down beside Jiakong. From here, I can almost see the bird fully. The leaves cast shadows around its body that help camouflage its iridescent green feathers against the bark of its tree. Its full back is towards me from where I'm sitting. Jiakong looks down his sights and adjusts his aim. I pluck my ears with my fingers and look up at the bird on its branch when I see it move. And I expect it to fly off. But then I realize it's turning its head to look around, and as it does, I can see clearly that the bird's head is different now. No longer the tiny head of an Asian glossy starling, but the much larger head of an elderly woman with long black hair. I gasp. I'm about to yell at Jiakong not to shoot when I feel the shockwave of his gun go off and the sound of its massive explosion ringing through my body, even though I plugged my ears. We both watch as the body of the bird drops past the tree limb it was sitting on and becomes the much larger silhouette of a woman's body, falling against and snapping tree branches before thudding on the soft jungle ground. Seeing this makes my limbs feel far away, and an intense feeling of dread makes me aware of how hard my heart is beating. Xiaokong lifts his head off the rifle. His eyes look confused. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out his plastic bottle of vodka, about halfway finished already, and he takes a long sip. His hand is shaking as he recaps his bottle, and he runs a hand through his burnt nest of gray hair to try to calm himself. Bad, Xiaokong says, pulling the bolt of his rifle back and smacking its frame to get the spent bullet casing out. Must go now. He slings the rifle back over his shoulder and stands up. I've never seen him get so panicked before, and it scares me. What was that? I yell, and I can feel dread building and calcifying in my body. Xiaokong doesn't say anything. He pulls his silver compass out and waits for the needle to settle. Sweat builds and drips off the ridge of his nose, and I feel how intense this static heat is. It builds on top of our sweat and insulates us in sticky warmth. Even when wind blows through, it is warm, wet air. The droning of cicadas is starting to make me feel nauseous and off balance. My arm itches and I scratch at it, feel the risen skin, and realize something bit me and I didn't know. As soon as the compass needle settles, Xiaokong breaks into a fast walk. The alcohol makes it so he's stepping through thick bushes and thorny branches with no reservations, and I can see his thighs bleeding slightly from random nicks and cuts. I follow after him and ask again, Apa tu? He's still silent, walking so fast he's almost at a jog, and so I ask again, Na kasi sama? He turns around with massive eyes and snaps, How I know? He takes another rush step forward where his foot lands awkwardly on a large protruding tree root and causes his ankle to roll and almost fold in on itself, and Xiaokong gasps and falls sideways. I rush over to him and see his face, hundreds of deep wrinkles creased in pain, and his teeth clenched tight in his open mouth. I look down at his ankle and see that it doesn't look horrible but is already starting to swell and redden. Ah! Xiaokong breathes, trying to move his leg and wincing at the pain. I put a hand on his back and say, Is it bad? Pain turns into anger on his face and he glares at me. Bad! Bad! Very bad! Can you stand? He doesn't say anything and tries to sit in a more upright position, and I can see him flinch anytime something causes his foot to shift. We're close, right? I ask, thinking about where we set camp. It's gonna be a long walk through a slippery stream and uneven earth back to the car, and thinking about this sends a fresh wave of panic through my sternum. Xiaokong doesn't say anything, and he tries to stand back up again. He's got a palm flat out on the ground, and his face turns bright red, and I can see lumpy veins appearing on his forehead from the strain of trying to stand. I come over and wrap an arm around his back to try to prop him up on his injured side, and he gasps and winces hard as I lift him until he's standing. With his free hand, he reaches for his plastic bottle of vodka, uncaps it with his thumb and index, and takes a couple of big gulps that leave the bottle almost empty. He recaps the bottle and puts it back in his pocket. I look down at his ankle and see that it has started to swell into a big red taut balloon. Ready to walk? I ask, looking down the same jungle path we must have taken earlier. Massive, broad green leaves, and thick ferns and vines and orange lichen and clouds of gnats spread out in the air around us. It feels like even the air pressure here is different. It takes so much more effort to move, and I feel weighed down by some hidden gravity. I look back to Xiaokong for an answer and realize he's crying. Tears stream down his cheeks and he wipes them away with the back of his dirty hand, and it turns his tears into mud. It's gonna be okay, I say. Kita boleh, kita boleh. He nods silently at this, and we start taking steps forward. We move slowly through the jungle. Xiaokong's not a heavy man, but all that alcohol's made him sloppy and uncoordinated, and it doesn't take long for us to tire out. With my arm wrapped around his torso and his arm held to my back, our body heat mixes with all that humidity, and I can feel him sweating into my clothes. And I'm doing the same, and the smell of all this sweat and still air exhausts us even more, and we're forced to take breaks, leaning on trees for a few minutes before continuing again. Xiaokong's acting off now, is being really quiet. He keeps looking back at the way we came, and he looks scared. I can't get that image of that falling body out of my head, and I figure he must be thinking about the same thing. The sunlight that bores past the canopy shifts from its light yellow into a darker orange as the sun begins to set. and it makes me wish we could move faster. My stomach growls and I realize how hungry I'm getting. I hold tight onto Jiakong as we step over a large tree root nestled with granite rocks that make balance hard. I try to help lift Jiakong's foot over them, but the bottom part of his foot grazes against the top bit of a rock, and I hear him gasp, and he winces hard, grabs onto my shirt, and balls it up tight in his fist until the pain starts to disappear. Sorry, I say. Jiakong doesn't say anything, but he plants a wet kiss behind my ear and pats me twice with his palm. Evening comes and covers everything in warm orange sunlight that causes shadows to grow from dense greenery, starting to obscure what we can see in the jungle. More mosquitoes begin to appear, and I find myself scratching thoughtlessly at bug bites all over my arms and legs, the skin broken in some areas and sticky with thick sweat. Salty sweat mixes with small open wounds, and I feel stinging all across my legs. I look over to Jiakong, and I can tell he's really drunk now. His eyes roll around, and while he's let his injured foot go limp, his good foot's now a wobbly, unbalanced mess, and we nearly fall over a couple of times if not for the trees all around us to lean on for support, though I look down at my arms and see that rough bark has left tiny cuts and scrapes across the skin. I'm sweating hard and hungry, and I can hear the sound of a flowing stream close by. We're nearly there, right? Good boy, good boy, Jiakong says, patting me on the side of the hand he's holding onto me with. We take a couple more steps to what I'm sure is our camp, when the smell of rot returns in the periphery. It doesn't take long before the smell starts to intensify and the air is covered in thick fermented bitterness. We take a few more steps forward and finally see the clearing in the distance and our unmistakably navy blue tent. I could cry from relief, even though the smell of rot is fully overpowering at this point, making me feel nauseous and feverish. We're here! I yell, squeezing Jiakong's shoulder. I'm helping Jiakong hobble up to the edge of the clearing when I see a shape on the ground, opposite our tent and close to some ferns. Jiakong's eyes trail down to the shape, and the moment he sees it properly, he starts screaming and lets go of me and falls to the ground, and I see his eyes are massive, and he's screaming over and over again and starts to desperately crawl away from our campsite in full panic. I look down at what Jiakong saw and see that it is a woman's bare body resting on her side, positioned so she's looking right at the entrance of our tent. Her body is perfectly still, and from where I'm standing, I can only see her back and her long black hair. There is a bullet's nasty exit wound coming out her back, below her shoulder blade, and there is broken up red flesh and yellow fat pushed upward and outwards to form a jagged flowering wound. Panic and dread mix with adrenaline, and the humid smell of rot is so intense it is almost solid in the air. Feels like I am inhaling rancid fat into my lungs, and I turn away from the body and double over, trying to vomit into the ground, racking my chest with big heaving, though nothing but thick saliva and bile comes up as I've barely eaten anything. Nauseous and unsteady, I look up to see Jiakong has crawled up to the base of a massive tree and has propped his back up against it. I walk towards him and feel another wave of nausea forcing me to my knees and making me heave at the ground, with nothing but stringy saliva coming down, and I'm exhausted from the effort, and I get back up on my feet and stumble up to Jiakong. I look at this tree Jiakong is sitting under and realize I cannot see its top past the thick leafy canopy. Evening is in full force now. Unsaturated, dim orange sunlight shines through and casts everything in its amber glow, while everything the sunlight can't reach is obscured in dark green dusk. Jiakong's eyes are large, and even though he's swaying from alcohol, I can still see all that fear plainly on his face, and it makes me feel horrible. My throat is extremely dry, and I'd do anything for some water. Cannot go, Jiakong says, shaking his head and looking at our campsite. From here I can still see our navy blue tent, and my eyes can't help but gravitate towards the sight of the top of the body's head of black hair. The greenery covers the rest of her body from where we're sitting. Looking at her hair makes me feel dizzy, and I have to fight the urge to vomit, so I look away. I think we can just leave. Just leave and reach the car and go home, I say. But then I look down at Jiakong's foot and see that the skin has turned an agitated red color with few purple splotches blooming around the top part of his foot, and it is about twice the size of his good foot. Jiao didn't hear or didn't understand what I said, and he's staring at his foot too. And he gingerly adjusts it and winces when he moves it too suddenly. What do we do? I ask, trying to ignore the intense feeling of dread building up in my stomach and the thirst in my throat so dry it hurts to swallow. Good boy, Jiao nods, motioning me to come towards him with his palms. I crouch down and inch closer to Jiao, and when I'm close enough, he pulls me into a big hug. He wraps his arms around me and brings my head towards him with his palm, and he kisses me on the head over and over again, and I can smell the vodka when he breathes, and I hear him sobbing and realize he's crying, and he's kissing me over and over and over again and stroking my hair and holding me close to him, and I can't help it, and I start crying too. Big ugly sobs that rack my whole body, and I wrap my arms around him and hug him back, and I can feel all that sweat drenched in the back of his shirt, and I hold him as tight as I can and I tell him I love him so much. Good boy, he says again, patting my back, kissing my forehead, and letting me free from his hug. I sit back and I can see his eyes are all puffy with tears. He's got a river of snot coming down that he's wiping away with the back of his hands, and I say, still sobbing, It's okay. One night, I say, pointing at his foot. One night and then tomorrow we go. I feel something light stinging on my neck, and I slap at the itch and see that it was a fat, blood-engorged mosquito, now flattened and staining the grooves of my palm a bright red color. I swallow and feel how dry my throat is, and I look at our camp clearing, knowing the stream is right past it. What feels like an hour passes, and dusk is coming in full force, and we don't even have a fire, and my body is full of itchy mosquito bites. The sound of all the cicadas has gotten even louder. Constant white noise, as Jiao and I sit under this tree and wait for the time to pass. I can feel the bits of dry dirt in my socks that have mixed with sweat to turn into sticky mud, and I untie my damp shoes and pull my socks off to see pale, wrinkly toes. I pull my phone out of my pocket and see the battery has dropped to 51% now. The time is 7:51 p.m. and I am only getting thirstier with every minute, and I can't stop thinking about water and how badly I need it. I try to swallow what's in my mouth, but it's completely dry, and it makes my throat sting. I look to Jiao and his inflamed ankle, and I say, I need water. He looks up at me, starting to sober up now, but still really out of it, and he raises a pained eyebrow and says, Huh? I sigh and press my tongue against the roof of my mouth. Feel the dryness, and I say, 我要水. He nods, and he reaches down to his pocket and offers me the last quarter of vodka in his plastic bottle. I laugh a little and look at that vodka at the bottom, clear, just like water. I figure that maybe it can only help, and so I take the bottle, uncap it, and put it up to my lips, tilt it up, taste burning bitter fermentation, and I wince, bring the bottle down, smack my lips, and feel nothing but more dryness. And now this pungent, flowery bitterness mixes with the smell of rot I'd only just been getting used to, and I can't help but dry heave. I stand up, look at the clearing, the top of the body's head of hair, and have to look away from that immediate, heavy dizziness. I pass the bottle back to Jiao and I say, 我要水. His eyes go wide at this. 不可以. I look up at the clearing and figure I can probably walk around our campsite to the stream. I don't even need to get close to the body, I say. 不可以. He shakes his head again. I'm so thirsty, I say. No, Jiao grabs the tips of my fingers. 我回来, I say. No. No, Jiao yells over and over again. I'm sorry, I say, feeling my throat closing in on itself with thirst, and I start walking towards the stream. No, Jiao keeps yelling, and then I think I hear him crying. But I'm pushing past thick, heavy leaves and feeling the cool, damp earth on my bare feet, and I figure he's just being crazy now. The water's right there, and we don't even really know what's happening. The smell of rot is so intense now, and I can feel it like a solid rotten tooth in the back of my throat. I step past purple sea urchin-like flowers, out into the stream, and feel cold current between my toes. I see the big, rotting buffalo a couple of meters upstream from where I am. More of a general, large shape now in the dark orange evening, and I figure it's good that at least I get to drink from clean, fresh water so long as I give the buffalo enough space. And I bend down, scoop clear river water up in my palms and take a big drink, and immediately taste slimy fermented rot. And I swallow the water anyway from how thirsty I am. But I look up in confusion and see that I hadn't actually walked far away from the buffalo body to take a drink of water, but I'd walked right up beside it instead. I start to feel like something is really wrong, and it makes me start to panic, and my head feels heavy. I look at the dead water buffalo body, its head looking away from me and upstream, and I see now that there are Chinese characters etched perfectly in the skin close to its backbone, and I hadn't noticed it before, from how dark red the wound is, in contrast to the buffalo's black skin and the characters read, 西六中总有一知识体, and I have no idea what it means. Thirst is still thick in my throat, and so I wade over to the left of the buffalo and try to drink from this cleaner water again, and the water still tastes bitter, and I look up and see that I haven't moved. I cup more water and bend down so that I'm basically drinking right from the flowing stream, and I immediately start to feel so much better as my body's calling for it disappears. I stand up again and start walking back upstream of the water buffalo's body. And I see our campsite and the backpacks we left behind. And I start thinking about all those snacks, and I feel how hungry I am. And even though the smell in the air is constant, I can't stop thinking about how badly I want a salty cracker on my tongue. I walk past where I must have come out into the stream, and figure I'm getting used to the smell anyway. So I might as well grab a bunch of those salty crackers and run back to Jiakong. Maybe even grab some alcohol for him. I mean, why not, right? He's already fucked his leg up. Alcohol can only help at this point. And so I keep walking until I'm at the edge of our camp clearing, and I can see the body fully now. A pale, dark purple naked woman, sagging slightly with decomposition, and the stench pierces my nostrils and makes my eyes water. There's a bullet wound in her chest. Looking at her makes me so dizzy I nearly fall over backwards, but I manage to step back in time. And I look away as fast as I can. And I figure if I'm doing this, I'm just gonna grab the backpack with the food and run. Fuck the alcohol. I sprint up beside our tent, grab the backpack by one of its straps, and sprint towards where Jiakong is. As I'm running, I feel a sudden intense weight over my whole body, and that dizziness comes over me, bringing me to a complete stop, and this weight over my whole body only gets heavier and heavier, until I'm forced down to my knees with all that weight. The air around me, a gravity pushing me downwards, and the dizziness in my head so strong I have to stop myself from puking up water. And I look around, feeling confused, and see that I am right between our tent and the woman's dead body. And this heightened gravity forces me all the way down until my face is on the ground. And I start to feel so tired. Deep exhaustion, coming in with the immense weight of all this air. I can feel the gravity bringing my eyelids down, and even with all this fear and adrenaline going through me, I try to fight this tiredness and keep my eyes open, but my eyes feel slippery, and I can't seem to focus on anything anymore, and I can't help but fall asleep. Dreamless sleep, and I wake up in pitch black night to a piercing ringing sound in my ears. Tinnitus amplified to a wall of sound surrounding me and pushing me downwards. Immense gravity with this ringing in my ears, and I try to move my body, but I can't under all this weight. I'm breathing heavy now, full of panic, and I can feel a scream building in my throat, but I can't get it out. Rancid stench of rot in the air, competing with this ringing sound in my ears, so overwhelming I need to get up and leave the smell, but still, my body is totally paralyzed by this weight, and I can't see a thing in all this dark. I try to shift my body, and I can feel coarse nylon against my skin. In all this dark, I realize I can feel arms around my body, and something is making contact with my back, and I can feel something touching me, something against the back of my head, something pressing into my back, all the way down to my tailbone. Panic in my whole body like when blood rushes back to a limb that's fallen asleep. And again I try to squirm against this immense weight and ringing in my ears, so loud it feels like my whole body is vibrating from the frequency. I try to shift again, and I feel these arms wrapped around me, and I feel that they are cold and wet with loose, bloated skin. And with that stench of decay all over me, I realize it is the body holding me from behind, and I'm trying to scream so hard. and I'm trying to move, but this ringing in my ears keeps pushing me down into the ground. I have no idea how much time has passed, and I am here in the dark, hyperventilating, trying to squirm my way free when I feel that my toes are moving. When I try hard enough, I can bend the tips of my fingers. I focus on this now and try to block out that constant, high-pitched drone. I focus on my toes, move them up and down, and then my fingers. And I curl them up and spread them open over and over again. I keep doing this until I can feel an ankle shift, and I keep thinking about my body, and push out every other thought, and try to ignore this pungent, fermented stench. And soon both ankles are moving up and down, and then I focus on my wrists, and soon I'm able to wriggle my arms too. I start to be able to hear my breathing past the high-pitched ringing, and I can start moving my knees. And then I move my legs higher up, and then I'm able to move my torso, and I start to squirm away from the body pressed tight against me. It takes so much effort, pushing myself against this thick gravity, but as soon as I start to move so that the body isn't making contact with my back anymore, I can feel more of my limbs moving, and this weight is starting to lift. And then all at once, I find my whole body moving, and the ringing disappears, and my vocal cords are free, and I'm screaming until my throat's raw, and still groggy from all that weight. I stumble back up to my feet in the pitch black dark, and I turn around, and I just run forward and straight into more nylon, and I try to push against the nylon, and it doesn't budge, and I walk around more and feel the walls of where I am and realize I am in our tent, and I keep pressing my palms against the tent fabric until I push hard enough against what must be the entrance, and I push with too much force, and I hear a zipper give, and I fall through the tent opening and out into the humid pitch black jungle. Jakong! I scream into the night, no idea what time it is or where I am. Jakong! I scream again, and hear nothing but the chirping sounds of insects and hoots from some animal. Jakong! I scream again, standing up and feeling the cool ground against my bare feet. I feel a weight in my pocket and remember it's my phone. I pull it out and I tap the screen on and see that it is 3:30 a.m. and I only have 23% battery left. I tap the flashlight on, and pale white light illuminates everything in a feverish fluorescent glow that causes the things lit up to cast long shadows out in every direction. I start running to where I must have left Jakong and keep yelling his name. Jakong! Jakong, I'm here! 我在这里! I reach what feels like a familiar spot in the jungle, but I don't know anymore. I walk up to a large tree that must have been where we were resting. He shouldn't have even been able to move with that ankle. I bring both my palms up to my mouth and yell, Jakong! But the words just get swallowed up by the jungle's constant white noise, and I don't hear Jakong's voice calling back. I can't stop myself from breathing fast, and I can feel panic building up in my feet, and if Jakong's not here, then for sure he's back at the car already. It's so late, he probably hobbled his way there and is waiting for me. It makes sense. I feel the sensation of something looking at me, a pressure boring into the back of my head, and it pushes my legs into a sprint to get as far away from this spot as possible, and I run to the sound of flowing water. I push past sharp leaves that dig into my skin, and feel thorns rub against and puncture raw insect bites on my thighs and feet. And I keep running with my flashlight up, illuminating everything a couple of meters in front of me in a cone of white light that is quickly swallowed up by the jungle night. The sound of running water grows, and I smell the thick, fragrant, sweet, sappy scent of pandan. I point my flashlight forward and see that there is a small field of pandan. Their long leaves spiky at the ends and sharp on the sides. They smell like freshly cut grass mixed with melted sugar. I step through the pandan, feel their tips poke at my thighs, and I break past their leaves and step into the fresh cold stream. I point my flashlight up and see that the buffalo body upstream, and with that, I turn around and walk downstream, trying to retrace our steps. My feet slip on algae-covered rocks, and I fall into the stream and I hit my cheek against a sharp rock, and I feel the pain radiating through my whole head, and cold water soaking into my clothes and water burning up my nose. And I get up as quickly as I can and spit and feel my throbbing cheek and ignore the pain and how cold the water is. My phone was dipped in the water, and a warning shows up on the screen now. Do not recharge until water has dried from charging port. The flashlight still works, and I look at the top and see I only have 15% battery left, and I pick up the pace and try to wade through the water faster. My foot slips on another slimy wet rock, but I manage to catch myself with my hands. But in doing so, I slam my phone face down against a dry, hard rock, and though the flashlight is still on, the whole screen turns into a cracked, bloppy mess of pink, blue, and green LCD liquid. Fuck! I breathe, and I keep going forward. I shine the flashlight up and look on either side of the stream. Where had we come out from last time? I wade a little further downstream, raise the flashlight up again and see something familiar. A small disturbance in the vegetation where some bushes have been flattened, and maybe it was where we'd walked out from. I don't have much battery left, and I can't stay here all night, so I decide to follow this path, and I step out of the stream and back onto damp, cool earth. I'm panting from the exhaustion of wading through water. I'm trying to keep my balance. The smell of rot in the air is completely absent now, and it is just the thick smell of wet earth and humidity. I see a trail in the dirt and I start to follow it. I follow the trail until I reach another patch where the greenery has been flattened by someone stepping over it. And I follow these clues until I reach a familiar looking tree. And I shine my flashlight to its base and see those Chinese characters Jiakong had used for navigating us into the jungle. 一只有一只观鸟. I sigh with relief, knowing the car is just ahead, and Jiakong has to be too, and so I start yelling, Jiakong! Jiakong! 你在哪里? I don't hear anything in response, and it fills me with a heavy feeling of dread. I shine my phone flashlight on the dirt trail and follow it until I see a big shape in the dark ahead, and I bring the light up and see that it is Jiakong's car, collecting dried out leaves on its windshield. Jiakong! I call out again, and hear nothing but the constant drone of cicadas. I walk up to the car door, try to pull it open and realize it's locked, and Jiakong had the keys. Fuck, I breathe, and all I want to do is sit down and cry. I walk around the car and try all the doors, and all of them are locked tight. I mean, of course. I shine my phone light down on the dirt trail the car drove through to get here, and I follow this trail now. My flashlight finally dies, and I'm covered in deep night, but I take a breath, try to stay calm, and I make sure my bare feet stick to the dry, dusty trail. I walk for what feels like many minutes in the dark, until I start to hear the sounds of cars driving down the highway. The trail grows wider, and dry dirt gives way to sharp, loose gravel, and I walk until I see the dull orange glow of streetlights in the distance, and I keep walking until I step out of thick jungle and onto the side of an empty highway. There is nothing here now but the sound of wind and the occasional car in the distance. Headlights show up ahead, and a car drives right past me way too fast to even notice I'm here, and I'm too late to call for help. I realize I'm still holding my phone in my hand, and so I put it in my pocket and lift my thumb up to hitchhike. I can see dark purple sunrise appearing on the horizon, coming up behind more dense rainforest on the other side of the road. In the dark, all I can see is the jungle's massive outline, the fluffy edges of trees and the silhouette of occasional treetops growing above the canopy. Some animal makes a long, drawn-out hoot, and I hope someone picks me up off the side of the road soon.
When the twilight is gone and no songbirds are singing, when the twilight is gone, you come into my heart, and here in my heart you will stay while I I pray. My prayer is to linger with you at the end of the day, in a dream that's divine. My prayer is a rapture in blue, the world far away, and your lips close to mine. Tonight, while our hearts are aglow, oh, tell me the words I'm longing to know. My prayer and the answer you give, may they still be the same for as long as we live, and you'll always be there at the end of my prayer. Sweet, yeah, that went great.
This is Shaun. Thank you so much for listening to my performance of Deep Green Gravity. Upstairs Neighbour Media is a growing collective of young artists. For more, check out our Insta and YouTube pages. To get in contact with us or to make a contribution, visit our Patreon page. Thank you, and read on.